Welcome to Parenting Different, a place where real adoption stories come to life. My name is Anna Bernacki, and this is the Parenting Different podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Parenting Different podcast. My name is Anna Bernacki, and today we have with us Julie Etter, and I am so excited to have you with us and to talk about adoption after infertility. I think this is a topic that we don't talk about enough, the healing, the process, and how complex it can actually be. So I'm excited to hear your story and have you share with us. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you ended up in this space today.
Sure. So first, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's, I gotta say a fun talk. It's probably not a fun thing to talk about, but it'll be fun talking to you. Oh, so yes, I am Julie Etter. I have 5 children. Bookends are both adopted. So there's Isaac, who is 27, and then my youngest, Micah, who is 17. So 10 years
Okay.
apart between our adopted kids. And we honestly didn't mean to wait so long to adopt between the two, but I kept just on that infertility search, like what is wrong with me, and
Yeah.
just a lot happened for in that 10-year period with my own personal health and infertility and pregnancy loss and all of that, and so it just wasn't the time. So yeah, but yeah, so we've got the 5 kids. I have 2 grandkids now, and am my trade, my profession is I'm a middle school humanities teacher. So I spend my days with middle schoolers, and for whatever reason at our school, that's mostly boys. So I've got
Good
4
times.
boys at home and mostly middle school boys at school. So surrounded by lots of boys.
Well, you do it well. You carry it well. So talk to me a little bit about the beginning of your journey. I know just we've had many conversations before, so I know a little bit of your story, but tell me about how, started with family planning and realizing that you weren't going to be able to build your family the traditional way.
Yeah. So I was married young, and pretty soon after we got married, we just wanted a family. We wanted a family. We knew we would have a family. And so we didn't wait very long. I should have been clued into the fact that something was wrong with me when every birth control pill I tried initially made me into a raving lunatic. Just absolutely. The mood swings were horrendous on them. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, just the pain that each cycle I would have, which I always did, which again should have been a clue. But you kind of just think because it's not talked about, this is just what it's like to be
Right.
a woman, kind of thing.
Yes.
Talking,
Yes.
fainting as a teenager, vomiting, like it was just brutal, and just no one talked about it. So that's just what it's like to be a woman. And so I didn't know a
Right.
lot. So we did figure out pretty quickly after trying a few different birth control pills that this is not for us, and we know we want to have children. So why are we doing this? So let's just stop that.
Yeah.
And then it didn't happen. And like I said, we were young, so it should have happened pretty quickly, and it didn't happen. And so for about, well, it was I guess they made me because I was so young. I had to wait that full year before they would do any
Yeah.
testing or anything like that. And I remember, I don't remember at what point I was in the journey, but just we could have a whole other podcast about insensitive doctors.
Oh my goodness. I think that goes hand in hand with this conversation
Yes.
though.
That's why
Truly.
we don't,
It's
yeah,
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 it's doctors being dismissive is why we end up saying, "Oh, well, I guess it's just me. It'll be fine. This is normal," because they
right.
dismiss us. It's awful.
It's, I remember one doctor saying, okay, I'm jumping all around here. I don't remember at what point this was. This was before I started all of my pregnancy losses. So for 4 years, we could not conceive at all. And then the last 3 years, I started this journey of pregnancy loss after pregnancy loss. I think that my count is up to 9 pregnancy losses. Um,
Wow.
we even stopped telling people about them because, again, it's just the stigma. It becomes embarrassing for some reason. I don't know why. I even hate saying that, but it did, and I that lasted all through until I think I had my last pregnancy loss at 40 with a surprise pregnancy. So, there was a lot. At some point in that early journey, in that 4 years, I remember I told a doctor said to me, um, we don't know. Well, they never really knew what was wrong with me. They suspected probably some endometriosis. They didn't think it. Why, I don't know, but they didn't think it was severe. I don't know how they could know that. Like, it doesn't show up on ultrasound or anything, and they just kept saying, "I don't think you have it horribly, so we're not going to do anything about it." How they determined that, I can't tell you. Um,
Right. Just being
yeah,
dismissive again. Yeah.
right. Um, But in that first 4 years, I remember a doctor telling me one time, "We're not sure what's wrong, but maybe we should try some IVF or something like that." And I just said, we can't afford that. We're a young married couple. My husband's a Christian school teacher. They make nothing. So we there's no way we can afford that." And I remember him saying to me, and it's at this point I changed doctors. He said, "Well, not to be rude, but if you can't afford that, can you afford to even have children?" And yeah.
Oh my goodness. How?
So I
How
changed
do we
doctors
sleep
at
at
that point.
night?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. So then after about 4 years, that's when we adopted. Well, actually it was at 3 years I changed doctors. So that was about 3 years in, I guess, that doctor said that because that's when I changed doctors. The next doctor I found was much more very sensitive guy. Um, and I remember when I got my first healthy ultrasound, he cried. And so it was like the first doctor that I had that was like really sensitive to all of it. But about 3 years in, switched doctors, and he at some point after testing a couple of pregnancy losses, he said, I don't know what's wrong with you. You probably have some endometriosis, but I don't, again, I don't know why he would say this. I don't think it is severe enough to cause all of this. Your cycles are normal, so he
Just
wouldn't
making
even
assumptions
right,
without
he wouldn't
fact.
even talk to me about PCOS because I had normal cycles. He said, "So if you um, want children soon, I can really only recommend adoption to you because I don't know what to do with you." And he was not throwing out IVF or anything like that because since he didn't know, he was smart enough and sensitive enough to know I'm not going to put you through all of that if we don't even know why you're
Right.
struggling with this and what kind of thing. So and so that's what threw us into adoption at that point. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's so interesting that he says, well, you'll just have to adopt. Like, it's another fertility treatment. Just adopt. Like
Mm-hmm.
a no brainer, no preparation, no
Right.
nothing. Just
Yeah.
adopt.
Just adopt.
That's
Like that's the
mind
answer
blowing.
to
And
everything. Yes.
yeah, and I heard that. And I mean, I'm sure countless other women have heard just adopt. Like it's just another take this pill. Like it's just so much more complex than that.
Well, it's. I was just gonna say it is so much more complex, um, and so at that point, they just even stopped talking to me about it. Just stopped looking, and I still wanted to know what's wrong with me. I finally know now.
Right.
You've heard this from me. I had a full hysterectomy and ovary removal a year ago because I finally, still all those years, completely normal, but just my health, my blood works just started to tank. And we realized that for years I had been living with chronic anemia.
Wow.
that was really, when you're about to turn 50, your body doesn't compensate for things like that anymore, kind of thing. And so and then on top of that, so for ever how many years, 49, so I'm 50 now, 49, chronic anemia. That's what sent me to the doctor. And I said, I'm having this pain, but I'm in so much pain all the time anyway, because I'm a woman and that's what women happens to women, right?
Right. Yep.
So I said, but it's not coming and going with my cycles. It's staying. So they did an ultrasound and they said, okay, you've definitely got some cysts going on your ovaries. Um, but there's this one on your right ovary that, no, left ovary. They picked it up as my left ovary. Your left ovary that it's kind of big. And we probably need to look at that. We went back and forth, and I remember the date because my son got married on September 14th last year, and I just grinned and bared it through his wedding. And then the next day, my husband had me in the ER because I was in so much pain I couldn't stand up.
Wow.
And the ER doctor told me, yeah, you've got this cyst, but I don't think it's a torsion because, like, you're not in enough pain. You're not in enough pain for it to be that. Wrote me off. Went back and forth as to whether I had ovarian cancer, had me terrified for about 2 months.
Two
And
months?
so, yes,
You're just sitting on this for 2 months?
yes,
Oh my
yes.
goodness.
One ultrasound, they would say, "Oh no, this is just a cyst," and the next ultrasound, "No, this looks like a tumor." And they went back and forth, and finally, I was like, "Can we just take it all out? Just take it
Who
all out."
cares what it is? Get it out.
So when I woke up from my surgery last November 21st, the doctor said to me, I've been doing this for a long time, and I just knew you had ovarian cancer. When I opened you up, you looked scary. He kept using the word scary. Not only did I have an ovarian torsion, but it was my right ovary that had flipped and traveled to the left side and attached itself to my bowel. And that was the pain. Who knows how, I mean, by this time everything was dead. So who knows how long it had been going on. But
Oh
I've just
my
been being
goodness.
written off this whole time. So, and then he says, did anyone say anything to you about endometriosis ever? And I said, well, it's been mentioned, but kind of written off, and no one would acknowledge PCOS because I had normal cycles. And, and of course, this is, a doctor, he didn't know me back then, with all the infertility. And I was like, I suffered horrendous infertility and pregnancy loss. He said, yeah, your body is riddled with endometriosis and damage from PCOS.
You know, the thing
Yeah.
that is crazy, and we say this as a joke, but I think it's so real that if that
Mhm.
was a man, you would have been on the operating table that night. Like,
Well, well,
there is no way.
he told my husband, he's like, I don't know how she was walking around with this. And I said, well, it's like I've just been in that kind of pain my whole life and just keep getting
Right, you
written
didn't
off.
have a choice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He said that what she had inside her, especially with that torsion and stretched to the other side, and it was so far over that it was my right ovary, and the ultrasound picked it up as a left ovary. Like that's how far over it
That is
was.
insane.
Yeah. And he said, like, she should be in the floor in the fetal position. And my husband knew enough to say, yeah, that's why people kept writing her off. So I
Yeah.
say to my kids now, it's like, I've never seen myself as a tough woman, but I think I'm kind of tough. I think, I think I'm kind of
Yeah.
strong. Yeah.
I think that is so much more common than we
Mhm.
even realize, which is really, really sad. But I
Yeah.
know I've had
Mhm.
experiences the same way. And I get dismissed because I have a high pain tolerance. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I have a family. I have a job. Do you want me in bed? No, I went to the doctor. You told me I was fine.
Right.
So
And,
I'm
and,
fine.
and and if you fight them on it, then you're the crazy woman. Yeah.
Right, then you're the pain pill seeker or
Right.
the I can't tell you how many times I was called that prior to my hysterectomy. I would have doctors, "Well, you're seeking." And I was like, look at my history. I've never been on anything.
Right.
Like, how am
Yeah.
I seeking if you've never
Yeah.
given me anything? This is not,
Yeah.
it doesn't
So
add
that, yeah.
up.
So yeah, that's kind of become my one of my big advocacies in the last year or two. Younger women than me is it's not just about fertility. This is your health. This is women's health.
Yes.
Yeah. So don't let a
Yes.
doctor say we're done talking about that now because you've adopted or because we don't know what's wrong or we can't help you, so we're done talking about it. This is your health. It's not
Yes.
only about fertility. Yeah.
Well, and I had even my situation went a little bit farther too, in that I had never been pregnant and I had never had well, I hadn't even had losses. I had just never gotten pregnant. And so, while I had adopted several children by this point, the doctor was like, "Well, you haven't had children and you're still in childbearing years. So we don't want to do a hysterectomy. We don't want to do anything." And I'm like, "Do you are we looking at the same ultrasounds? Are we looking at the same thing?" Like, and I had to convince her that I was perfectly happy and I was satisfied with where I was at. It was insane. Then they did the preoperative testing and they did find cancerous cells. What if I had been
Mhm.
ignored? Like, I'm
Right.
so thankful that it was removed at the time it was, because then it was contained, everything was fine, no further treatment, I'm good. But
Mhm.
what if? That would have been
Right.
really scary, and that had to be me convincing them that, yes, I'm still in childbearing years, I have never been pregnant, and I'm good. Like, I have the family I want, and I don't need anything else, and that was women's voices need to be heard and listened to, and it needs to be considered for health and not just childbearing, because it's more than just childbearing.
Right. And what's so scary and sad to me is my daughter is 24 and showing a lot of the same symptoms that I showed.
Yeah.
And so she's going through all of that now. And she just recently had an appointment with a doctor. And she has, for the past 2 years, doctor after doctor, insensitive, just blowing her off, whatever. And so we have a friend who works in labor and delivery, and we just said, tell us the name of the best doctor in town that she can go to that says, look, I feel scared and I feel written off and I'm completely hopeless. Even if you agree with what everything the doctors have told me, don't make me feel that way when I leave here. Just tell me someone that's going to hear that, And so they gave us a
Yes,
name
or
of someone, and
validate it. Don't
right, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And so she went to this doctor, and this doctor was fantastic. But what was sad to me, and she was able to say, look, my mom goes to the same practice. You can look up her records, um, and this is what's wrong with her. Um, and I fear that I have a lot of the same things. And the doctor said, unfortunately, I don't have very many different things to tell you than what was told to your mom 30 years ago or 25 years ago. She's like, because there hasn't been research. Women's health is not research. And that doctor was telling her that with sympathy, like and embarrassment almost.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
but
you know,
still,
still. And that,
how?
and I was just like so hoping for my daughter, she would have better answers and a
Right.
better. And they're not giving her that, and I just think that's sad. you know, yeah,
Yeah, it truly is. Why isn't this being looked at? And I think also just the sensitivity around it, like, it sounds like she finally found a doctor who at least can acknowledge the deficits and can acknowledge that there's a problem. But there's such a lack of sensitivity. It's almost like, well, that's your problem, not mine.
yeah.
Well, no, I'm
I had
here
a,
because I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't have any other I don't know. I'm not a doctor. So that's why I'm here.
I think after my third pregnancy loss, I had a doctor, and everyone will say, the females are more sensitive. I actually have not had that experience. I've had just as much insensitivity. Um, I remember this doctor telling me after she told me there was no heartbeat, and I'm just weeping in her office, and she was brand new, and I had her later again, and she was wonderful. So I just think that she was probably feeling awkward because I was probably a basket case. It's a third pregnancy after all. Yeah,
Still, that's not your
yeah.
fault.
And she said her words were, "I'm so sorry. I guess this was a really desired pregnancy." And so that was her words to me. And
Oh man.
at that point, I just was like, I give up. You know, white flag. I surrender. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so that all of that is then what I took into adoption. Um,
Yes. So talk about that. How was that? You beginning the adoption process and the emotions and everything tied into that.
mhm. Well, our first adoption went very quickly. Um, I was ready to jump right in. My husband was a little slower, so it was probably a few months before we went to the adoption agency. But once we went to the adoption agency, and I'm a fixer, I'm a doer, tell me something's wrong. It's a, we wouldn't have all the internet like we do now, the access to all of it like we do now. But these days, I could tell you everything about hysterectomies and everything that I've gone through in the past year because I'm all over the research.
Yeah.
So when we decided that we were going to adopt, like that, I was just all over that. It gave me something else to really obsess over, and not the infertility. For a time that didn't last long. Um, so that kind of occupied my brain space leading into it, and then we went into the adoption agency on May 9th, and Isaac moved in with us on June 9th, and we were having visits with him in between that. So that's just how quick that happened. So we were kind of in a little bit of shock.
Yeah,
And
because
went
that's
in.
unusual and not how it typically goes.
We had not filled out the first paperwork, and I think the reason it went so quickly is that particular agency. I was going to say almost only, but I think only dealt in newborns, and he was the first non-newborn. He was a month before his second birthday, the day we went in, the day he was dropped off at the agency. So,
Yeah.
to them, that was an older child because he wasn't a newborn, and
Yes.
because we were willing to take him, uh, they got right on that. And he was older, and so they didn't want him moving from home to home,
Sure.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to get him out of the
Yeah.
foster system as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
That makes
yeah.
sense.
So, yeah. So I would say for the first couple of months, we were just thrown in and just falling in love with a beautiful little boy completely over our heads. All of that stuff. I mean, imagine starting
Yes.
your parenting journey very young with a 2-year old that has been through
Oh,
trauma. Yes.
I wasn't young, but I started my parenting journey with a 6-year-old. So yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's, yeah,
So,
I know.
that occupied our brain space initially, but pretty quickly it was very evident that we had a lot of grief that we had stuffed under the table, and just thinking we're going to be parents now. We did have a friend who was a couple who was walking ahead of us in this. They have a very similar story to ours, and I remember them saying, "Don't go into this expecting this to cure your infertility or to take away your grief or anything like that." So we had been prepared for that, but I don't think no one can truly understand that until you're walking it. Like,
Very true.
right.
Yes.
People give you all of those words of advice, but you've got to feel it before it sinks in. So, um, I, just almost immediately, within a couple of months, I'd say, just started to realize we are raising a child while we're still grieving. And I would not have put these words use these words then. It's only been recently that I've been able to acknowledge this or define a lot of what we were feeling then, but just putting a lot of pressure on Isaac to
Mm.
make us the happy family.
Yeah.
And then feeling very frustrated when, and I don't think that we were frustrated with him. We just fell in love with him. Like it was so easy to love, kind of thing. But just very frustrated in general with our situation because it was not easy at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then as I just remember as he was growing and having just his trauma coming out in his behavior and things, just I remember just crying with a friend. I shared this with you recently, but crying with a friend at one time saying we were supposed to give him a better life. And just sometimes feeling a lot of guilt because I still was carrying that pressure of this was our ticket to a happy family, kind of thing. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that happens so often in adoption, especially adoption after infertility, because you're starting out with your own loss that is different than the child's loss. So you're walking in with two different losses. And how do you how do you make sure that you are validating their loss and also not putting that pressure on, because you do want that happily ever after. And I think this is something that even recently with my story, I didn't really even put all the pieces together that my parents went through infertility. And that is why I was adopted into their family. And looking back, I think so many things that happened and so many things that went wrong were because of that undealt with grief that they
Hmm.
had and the expectations that they had. Because I've said for years that I always felt like I had to perform, and then I had to be a
Hmm.
chameleon, and I had to do all these things in order to be accepted. And now looking back and kind of putting all those puzzle pieces together, now I'm like, oh, that's why. It was
Yeah.
because they never processed their grief and they had expectations from us kids. And because it wasn't just me, they went on to adopt others as well. And there were expectations that no child, even biological, no child could have ever met, because they were living in that grief and we were supposed to be the band-aid for that grief. And I think it's so important when walking into adoption to realize that it is so wildly different. And while I walked through the infertility and I had that same experience, it wasn't even a conscious thing that I already grieved it and processed it before adopting. It wasn't conscious. It wasn't a choice, but something in me, and again, I hadn't put words to all these things yet, and I hadn't really put it all together, but there was something in me that just knew. And I knew that I had to close one chapter before I could start at least the expectations. Close the expectations of that one chapter before I could begin another. And I think that is something, again, going back to the doctor saying just adopt, it's treated as another fertility treatment in a way. Well, this
Hmm.
is like, it's just another family planning, you just adopt. And it's so much more complex than that. And we cannot compare adopting to biological children. We just can't. And when we do, we set everyone up for disappointment. Nobody will be happy if we are comparing and trying to make them one and the same. It
Right.
has to
Yeah.
be something different.
Yeah. It's funny when Isaac and I were doing our podcast, and I told him recently, I was like, we got to start that up again because it was great therapy for he and I to do. But
That's funny.
yeah, but we were doing one, and we both came to this realization that because of my grief and his grief, we were working against one another. And
Yeah.
where I um, I want, because I think all of the loss that I had, when I did have children, it like my biggest fear, well, I guess my whole Norman Rockwell dream in life is that all of my children and grandchildren and everyone are just always sitting around the table and loving one another, and just everyone is always together. um
Right.
and the thought of losing one of my children is probably, and I'm not talking through death. I mean, obviously that's every parent's fear, but
Right.
but I'm just talking, but losing relationship with one of my children is extremely, I live in fear over that sometimes. And so as I was raising my children, I was clingy, I would cling to them. I have learned that as they've become adults that the quickest way to lose relationship is to cling to them.
Funny how that works.
Every time Isaac would show us anger or behavioral issues, or whatever, I interpreted that to, he's going to leave us. We're going to lose him.
Mm.
He's going to go back to his birth family. All of those things. Like, we're never going to see him. As soon as he turns 18, he's going to leave here and we're never going to see him again. So that would make me cling tighter and would make him push harder. And so we were kind of working against one another that way. And it was we received advice from his mentor when he was around 17, that was, if you want a relationship with him when he's 30, let him go, stop arguing, stop pushing. He knows 100% everything you think, everything you believe, and the amount of love you have for him because you raised him in a home where all of those things were evident. Let him do his thing so that you still have a
Yeah.
relationship with him when he's 30. And that, there was something about that just clicked. and and that changed how we parented him at that age, and then all of his siblings coming forward. But yeah but yeah I
Yeah, that's
think that stemmed from my infertility and pregnancy loss, because
I'm
it was
sure.
like PTSD of loss again. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So, was there ever a time that was a conscious healing, intentional healing from all that loss, and you really took that focus, or was that kind of evident and processed through your relationship with and the repair with Isaac?
I would say that it happened in waves.
Sure.
Right. I think I lived in denial about it for a while because, again, it was just like, okay, that was a fertility issue. I don't need to think about that anymore. So it was kind of like stuffing it inside, for a while. But my healing with Isaac was helpful. I think my kids becoming, and maybe it's my work through parenting different, my kids becoming older, and so it became more appropriate for me to talk to them about these things. I was talking to my 19-year-old just a couple of weeks ago, and I said something about 9 miscarriages, and he said, "Mom, I didn't know it was that much," kind of
Mm,
thing. And so as the
yeah,
kids get older and they know more, and I see their sensitivity to that and their kindness to me, and that kind of thing, it's definitely healing. I think,
for sure. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, my healing with Isaac, I think he and I both just worked through a lot of owning our own trauma and PTSD from the past. And so that would probably be the biggest turning point, was probably about
Yeah.
10 years ago, when all of that started. And just being able to acknowledge, as a mom, I've messed up and I've carried a lot of my past into my parenting. And and I mean, that's half the battle, is being able to name it, right? And yeah, and so I think that was the biggest hurdle there. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So, as you looking back, would you have entered adoption? I mean, obviously, you have no regrets of your story, but if you knew then what you know now, would
Hmm.
you have taken more time? How would you have processed that?
Yeah, I went to no therapy. So looking back, we should have been in marriage counseling and individual therapy immediately. And I would have done that. Well, let me say I went through no therapy then. Um, I would say in the last 10 years, I've gone on and off, a
Yeah.
few different times. And so if I could say to adoption agencies or social workers, you can legally make someone go to therapy after experiencing this kind of loss coming into adoption, I think that would be really wise. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and I
for
just wish
sure.
that
Absolutely.
I wish that I had done that. Obviously, like you said, yeah, I can't change my story, and I, my boys are cannot imagine my life without my boys,
Right.
but but I definitely should have been seeking professional help. It should have been the first thing we did. I think
Yeah.
we don't. Like just keep going back to this. I don't feel like we acknowledge it as a loss. Society doesn't acknowledge it as a loss. Like I said, I stopped telling people when I had
So
miscarriages
true.
because I was
Yeah.
embarrassed, and so I wasn't treating it as really the death to me that it was. That
Yeah.
the healthiest period, we had a pastor who at one point who felt very strongly that even if it was a 6-week early miscarriage, if I went for that first heartbeat and didn't hear it, that we needed to have a memorial service. And I thought he was silly. I thought he was crazy. It kind of embarrassed me. But that brought so much healing. It's
Really.
just acknowledging what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't a huge service. It was just we were going to a little home church, so it might have been 10 people there, kind of thing.
Right.
And but so it wasn't huge, but it was just, a handful of people saying this was a loss to you, this was a death to you, and we're going to mourn that. And I
Yeah.
wish that we had that mentality when we finally decided to adopt, like mourn this and then move on.
Right. Well, and I think even too, there another thing that society doesn't look at, one, no, they don't acknowledge the loss of miscarriages in the way that they should, but also they
Right.
don't acknowledge the loss of just not getting pregnant.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that is something that I struggled, the what is wrong with me? Why? So many unanswered questions. And I never, like, there was a time a doctor told me, I wish, or, well, at least you're not having miscarriages, is what they said. And I literally looked at the doctor and I said, I'll take one because then we can work with that. I don't
Right.
even, like, I can't even get pregnant. So at least
Right.
then we could work with that. Like, there's something happening here at least. So it was, and that sounds terrible to say out loud, but that loss of not even being able to have that positive
Mhm.
test was so significant, and we don't acknowledge that, and we don't
Right.
process it,
Mhm.
and it was, "Oh, well, at least you didn't have something worse." And I think that's so often as a society, we're always, "Well, somebody has it worse." And yes, that is true. Somebody does always have it worse than us, but that
But it
doesn't
doesn't
mean we're not
mean you're
allowed to grieve what we're going through.
yeah. I had someone tell me one time, if one more person tells me how hard it is to have a miscarriage compared to, I guess it was a loss at, like, I don't know, 30 weeks or something, like, was a later in the pregnancy. Now, granted, I know those are two different things, but a
Right.
loss is a loss, and we cannot compare our grief. You know, you know, we can't compare our
Right.
grief. The 4 years of not getting pregnant was brutal. That was horrible. That was
Yeah.
it was almost like a monthly loss because you could just like your weight,
Yes,
each
that's
month,
what I'm saying. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And so, comparing grief is something as a society that we are prone to do, and it's so dangerous.
Right. Right. And I think even that falls into, and this is a whole other rabbit trail, but that falls into even requiring the or putting the pressure on adoptees to be grateful, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
we're saying, well, at least your loss turned into this, so you should be grateful for it. I think it's so dangerous in so many ways to dismiss others' grief because each person, we don't know everybody's life circumstances. We don't know their whole background and their whole story. So every single person is going to look at grief from a different angle. They're going to look at their loss from a different angle, from a different perspective, and everybody has a different capacity for it. And so we have to give more grace.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So, what would you say now as we finish up here? Two questions. What would you say to the parent who is going through infertility right now and starting to explore the idea of adoption and thinking that that might be the path that they're going to go down? What would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, don't look for it as a cure. Don't look at it as a replacement. Um,
Yes.
that you know, definitely grieve what you're going through now. Get therapy. Go, seek mentorship. Seek, whatever it is that helps you grieve. That make sure that if you're married, make sure that your partner is that you guys are in sync through this. That
Yes.
you're grieving together. That that you're kind of in the same place here, because infertility aside, going into an adoption if you're not in sync is bad. Like that's not.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, so just make sure all those things are and just don't make sure that you're at the place that when a child is placed with you, you are 100% in that spot to be able to parent that child with no thoughts of your past anymore, that you have grieved your past. Ah, okay, that obviously you're gonna have thoughts of that. I mean, our trauma lives with us
Right,
forever,
but
but
not that longing.
right, yeah, yeah. And just you have to really really work very hard to not put that pressure on yourself and the child and your family in general, for this to be a replacement. um,
Yes.
I think that we do that. Probably not. I don't think I did that purposely. I don't think any of us do that purposely.
Right. No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're trying to heal a pain, and just making sure you're not in that spot anymore.
Yeah. So then there's the parent who has adopted and has realized that they have not handled their infertility grief at all. They have unmet expectations. They are in the thick of it, and life is really, really hard. What would your advice be to them?
I get support immediately. I always say that infertility and adoption are both two of the loneliest roads I've ever walked. And so get support immediately, get professional help, depending on how old your child is. If you've got a child that's old enough to talk to age appropriately, you never want to put your trauma on your child, right? So you don't want to make them your therapist. But say, look, we all brought trauma to this relationship. I'm going to own mine, and I want to get help for this, and I want this to be part of our healing, um,
Yeah,
kind of thing. You've got to measure that. Everybody, Isaac would have been able to hear that just fine by a certain time. Some kids can't, so you've got to measure that for with
sure.
your own kid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know your
but
child.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, if you know that, it it's yeah. If you know if you know that, you just have to do whatever you can to get help and get support immediately. So I would say when you're finding support, find support that helps you feel encouraged and hopeful, and not alone. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think all adoptive parents as a whole, especially adoptive moms, because let's be real, we carry a lot of the weight, a lot of the mental load and a lot of the emotional burden of the home dynamics, right? And I think it's so important for all of us to be in therapy. I'm a huge advocate of being in therapy and really working on your own issues, talking through things that are hard within the home, getting another perspective. Obviously, you want to be with somebody who is adoption competent and who understands. And some days I walk in and I kick my shoes off and I plop on her couch, and it is, I just have to tell you about these kids. And then other days we're going back to like deep childhood stuff and working on my own stuff. But all of it together, whatever is happening that week, all of it together gives me the capacity because I'm getting it off my chest. I'm getting it out. I'm getting that quality feedback. And it gives me the capacity to come back home and be a better mom.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
think it's so important for adoptive moms to be able to take that burden off, work through their own stuff, and then be able to come home and be a better mom. It's not just about the child's trauma. It's not just about fixing the child's behaviors. It's about the atmosphere of the home. And it starts with the moms. And it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is a lot of pressure. I know, and I 100% agree with you about therapy. I think it's fantastic. And I read one time that it takes an average of 3 tries before you find a therapist that you click with. And so
Yep.
if you go to one that doesn't agree or doesn't understand adoption and isn't willing to learn like yours did, it's okay to say, I just had to fire one of my sons recently. I just was
Yeah.
like, he's not coming back to you. Yeah, kind of thing. And they're
Yeah.
used to that. That's very common. That's very
Right.
common. And so don't
The
give up
therapist
on
I
that.
have is my fourth.
Yeah.
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 She's my fourth
Mhm.
therapist. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't give up on that. And follow through with that. You'll be a better mom um, if you follow through with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story. I hope that our listeners are encouraged and just realize that they're not alone in this journey. And as you're going through infertility, it is so lonely. And then starting the adoption process, and it that is also lonely, but there are others out here, and we at Parenting Different are here, and we exist because we want to fill that gap. So thank you so much for being a part of this with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.